In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So God willing, today we're going to continue where we left off in James chapter 4. We got halfway through, but we can just start reading from the beginning again, just to kind of get a context of what we're going to be studying today. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. So he's speaking about our fulfillment, our satisfaction, our enjoyment of life. Why is it that we are not satisfied? Because we are seeking our satisfaction from somewhere else other than God. And then why is it that we do not receive when we ask from God? Because again, we're asking only for our selfish pleasures, our selfish desires, not for the things that are pleasing to God. Adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you think that Scripture says in vain, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously? But he gives more grace. Therefore he says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. And we were speaking about why is it that our joy should be turned to gloom. It's not because God doesn't want us to be joyful or happy. It's because when we focus on our sinfulness, when we focus on our wickedness, when we focus on the things that are actually preventing us from reaching God or being with God, this should bring us natural sadness. And also this sadness leads us to repentance, right? And ultimately repentance is what leads us to joy. So instead of trying to be joyful in the things of the world, we are joyful in God's forgiveness. We're joyful in God's presence.
That verse brings to mind like the other one that's just the opposite. Like when you should be sad to be joyful. Like when they're persecuting you, you would be sad. Like so, I had to switch it around because I was thinking it was the other one.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, Christianity is a paradox, right? Like it's a paradox because God is telling us, in the midst of the most suffering conditions, be joyful. And in the conditions and in the times where you should be like laughing, enjoying, and like yourself and indulging yourself, those times you should be sad. So when that's why it's difficult, like for someone who is not a Christian, and even for Christians, unfortunately, we as Christians, we have been so affected by the mindset and the worldview of this life and this world that we have a hard time understanding even what we really believe. Like we have a hard time understanding what is the concept of this faith? What is the Christian faith? What is the Christian faith talking about? Some people want to consider that the Christian faith is kind of like I live my life and I incorporate the Christian faith in it. And essentially by doing that, I pick and choose the parts of the Christian faith that are compatible with my life. And I feel, yes, God is blessing my life and everything is good and I'm happy. But that's not what the Christian faith is. The Christian faith is not do what you're going to do and incorporate Christianity and incorporate going to church and incorporate sacraments and incorporate. It's more than just taking our current direction and incorporating something. It's a complete change of direction. Like it's a complete change of belief. It's a complete change of lifestyle, right? Because it's not just about what I proclaim, what I say, the types of things I believe. It's about that faith is reflected in my actions. That faith is reflected in my daily life, in what I choose to do, in what I choose not to do, in the things that are important to me, in my self-discipline, in my time management. And all of this reflects our Christian faith. So when I'm in the midst of suffering, my Christian faith should be reflected in that, in the sense that I should be joyful even in the midst of suffering, according to what St. James is saying. And the opposite, like you were saying, Virginia, is true. That when we're in the midst of these joyful, maybe self-indulgent things that maybe people would be looking forward to and enjoying themselves, and we look at them and we say, no, this is not appropriate for me. Like, this is not the right environment for me. And so I will not partake of that, even though from a worldly perspective, that might be the best thing that everybody would aspire to and everything everybody wants to do.
So I should just do the opposite.
Do the opposite. That's why like Christ says that in the world we will be hated, because people will look at us and they don't understand us, and they look at us as being what sources of judgment for them. because they look at us and they say, we are accusing you. We're saying all the actions you're doing, all these things are wrong, right? They look at us and they say, well, you are not doing the same thing like us. We don't understand why, and we are kind of offended by you, right? Because you are saying that what we are doing is wrong. In the early church, St. Anthony is the father of monasticism. He had this very famous saying. He said, what? He's speaking about the future. He's saying, in the future, okay, the world will go mad. Okay, in the future, the world will go mad, and they will look at you and say to you about you, you are mad. You are not like us, right? So the world believes that we are mad, but they are the ones that are mad. Like they have been so taken with the spirit of the world that when they look at us who are not of the world, they can't understand us. We're like aliens to them, right? And unfortunately, even as Christians and even as believers and faithful believers, this mindset of the world creeps in, right? It creeps into our minds, it creeps into our emotions, it creeps into our our principles, our philosophies, our priorities. And so we always have to ask ourselves, is my lifestyle fitting according to what Christ has asked me to live or not? And because a lot of times these habits and these lifestyles have been incorporated in our life even as children, they seem so innocent to us. They seem so without any kind of issue, without any kind of problem, because we are so used to them. And what's wrong with it? Whereas really, like as we get older, we're called to be like self-examining. Like look at my normal routine, look at my normal thoughts, look at my normal perspective. What are the things that I do? Is it fitting or is it not fitting?
It's like Halloween, even. It makes me think of my mom because she's considered righteous by so many, like saintly actually. And then she would say, but go with the flow. And I'm thinking, this is like going against the current, but it makes you stronger because when you swim against the current, you're going to have to.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
St. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 1:27, but God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put shame to wise.
Yeah, and you see that reflected in the people that he chose, like to lead the church, like the apostles, for instance, right? The apostles, yeah, like they were not of any caliber of people that you would expect to put in charge of anything. I mean, let alone the church, nothing. Like you wouldn't put them as governors of a city. You wouldn't put them as even teachers in a school, right? Because they were illiterate, right? But God put them as the leaders of the church, right? Because the qualities that they had were what were needed for God, right? So that's the other thing is how do we see like how does God choose his servants? Maybe God chooses his servants in ways that we don't understand because the qualities that are needed to be a servant of God is not the same qualities needed to be a servant in the world, to be a leader in the world, because it's a different system, it's a different priorities, different thoughts, different ideals, different goals. Okay, so that was the first 9 verses. That's what we discussed last time in chapter 4. Okay, so we're gonna finish chapter 4 today, and if we have some extra time, we might start chapter 5, but we'll see how far we get. Okay. So he says, "Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up." Okay. So what is this humility? What is this humility? Like we use that word humility all the time, and it sounds like a nice word. You say, I want to be humble. Everybody wants to be humble, especially people that I've been in the church for a long time. Humility is praised in the church. Maybe outside the church, when you speak about being humble, people see it as weakness. No, you don't want to be humble. You want to be bold. You want to be, like we say like humility is like the opposite of strength almost, like in the world, right? When you see someone who is humble, you say it's like the opposite of strength. So like it's very clear on the crucifixion, right? Because the Roman soldiers who were there crucifying Christ, they mocked Christ and they told him, if you are so strong, if you are God like you claim to be, come down from the cross, right? Because in their mind, what is strength? In their mind, the definition of strength is this kind of visible power, this immediate power that's like aggressive, that's like can overcome anything physically in the world, right? It's like a physical power, right? And so someone who is acting with that kind of power, that kind of strength is seen as being a powerful person. I mean, even in our culture today, someone who is big and strong or someone who has a lot of authority, is seen as a powerful person, not as a humble person. Humility in kind of the common societal mindset is more like someone who is weak, someone who can't really get by, someone who doesn't have a lot of talent or a lot of power, a lot of things. And so they just kind of like don't have, they don't have the characteristics that's needed to succeed, essentially. Okay. Whereas Christ actually, while he was on the cross, demonstrating his humility, he demonstrated the greatest kind of power. In the sixth hour of the Good Friday prayers, we chant a hymn called The Only Begotten. In this hymn, we speak about how Christ demonstrated power in what looked to us like weakness. He demonstrated power in something that looked like weakness, but was actually greater than any other kind of power. And that power that he exercised was the power of restraint. Okay? Because he is God, completely powerful in every way. And if he chose to obliterate the entire world, he could choose to do it instantly. And yet he demonstrated restraint to stop from using that power, even though he was suffering, even though he was in pain, even though, he was being mocked and spat on and all of that. And yet he chose not to use the power that he had. Okay? And this is the true power, this power of self-control, this power of restraint. Same here with the idea of humility. Okay? Humility is power, okay? Because in humility, we see ourselves as we actually are, and we recognize that we are dust. So when I recognize that I am dust, when I recognize the reality of who I am, God is the one who lifts me, right? So someone who has their own power, that believes they are powerful, is one thing. But here we are saying what? That if we are humble, we will have the power of God. And when God lifts up someone, he is going to lift them up far higher than any other person can be lifted, because he is God. So instead of looking inside myself and finding this strength in myself and trying to convince myself that I am good, that I am successful, that I am powerful, that I am whatever, okay? Instead, I humble myself. And again, humility is not self-deprecation. Like, humility is not to act as though we are less, act as though we believe ourselves to be less. No, that's not humility. That's self-deception. Okay? That would be, I really believe I'm great, but I'm going to act like I'm not great. Like, I really believe I'm the best, but I'm going to act like I'm the last. Right? When Christ was saying he who was first will be last and who he was last to be first, it's not an act. Right? Sometimes we take humility as an act. Like, a lot of times, like, it's like, okay, you know what, I want to be humble, so I'm gonna do actions that look like humility. Okay, now I'm not trying to say that's wrong, because sometimes those actions help us to foster humility inside of us, right? That's like a different issue. Okay, but what is the essence of humility? The essence of humility is to see ourselves as we actually are, not to see ourselves as we imagine ourselves to be. Right? So we imagine ourselves to be capable, functional, strong, knowledgeable. Like, we see ourselves in all of those ways. But when you look at a pile of dust on the ground, how many of us actually, like, when you look at the pile of dust, the first thing that comes to our mind is, that's me. Like, we don't think that like that. Like, we clearly acknowledge that we are higher than dust. We clearly acknowledge that we have a lot of capability. Like, we are not only higher than dust, we're higher than all creation. Right? Like, we're higher than the animals. We're higher than nature. We're higher than, like, we have capabilities that nothing else that exists has here in the world. Okay? So our first impression of ourselves is we are higher. We are better. We're surrounded all the time with stuff that's less than us. We build the buildings that we use. We have the minds to think. We have the decision-making abilities. We've conquered nature. We've controlled it. We've done so much, and we're always learning more. Like, right? That's the thing with science, right? We're always learning. We're always conquering. We're always discovering. We're mastering the world around us. So because of that, because we're always comparing ourselves to what we see around us, and because God has made us to be higher than those things, okay, then we imagine ourselves to be great, right? We imagine ourselves to be great. So when somebody comes and says, no, you have to be humble, we're like, well, why should I be? And if you really think about it, if there were no God, there is no reason to be humble, because we are the best. I mean, we are the best. There is nothing that compares to us on the world. Period. That's the bottom line. So if I'm comparing myself only to what is in the world, then it's easy for me to imagine that I'm the best, so I have every right to be puffed up in that. I have every right to boast in that because I'm the best. I'm at the top of the food chain. Okay, we eat other animals don't eat us, right? But when you introduce God into the equation, now you're saying what? We are not the best. We are not only not the best, we are so far from being the best, like it's beyond understanding and comprehension how far away we are from the best. And the best, the true best, is the one that created us from the dust. So while we imagine ourselves to be so great when we compare ourselves to the things around us, when you really understand where we came from, we are no different than anything else around us. We are no different than these walls. We are no different than the dust of the ground. Because it says in the book of Genesis that God took that dust and he breathed life into us and made us to be alive. So the only difference between us and the dust is not some intrinsic quality that we have. It is the breath of God. It is the life that comes from God. So when God gives this life, it transforms us from being dust to being what we see ourselves now to be. So to be humble means that I recognize this. And I act in accordance with this, that in my relationship with God, I see him always as, you are the creator, I am not the creator. You are the master, I am not the master. You are the decision maker, I am not the decision maker. You're the one that directs me where to go, I don't direct myself where to go. Whatever you tell me, I will do. Right? This is true humility. True humility is manifested in our actions and our self-understanding. It is not manifested in self-deprecation. It is not manifested in saying, going around saying, I'm the worst. I'm bad at everything. Like other people are better than me, or those things that sometimes people think is a humble attitude is really just like low self-esteem. Okay, we can't say about ourselves that we are bad in the sense that, like, when God created us, he created us as being what? Very good. So intrinsically, God gave us value. Like he created us and said that we are like the pinnacle of his creation. So we can't look at us and say ourselves and say, you know what, I'm bad. God didn't create me good. No, that's wrong. That's completely wrong. God created me very good. This is what he said. It is not a lack of humility to acknowledge that God created us very good. The lack of humility comes what? When I puff myself even above God, okay? Or I attribute the good qualities that I have to myself, right? Again, we have to always, I am the dust. The only reason I have anything good in me is because God gave it to me, right? But God gave me good things. He gave me good things. Humility is not to deny the gifts that God has given me. Humility is to acknowledge that those gifts came from him and did not come from myself.
It makes me think that verse he said, if you're going to boast, I mean, I don't know if he says you're going to boast, but boast that you know God. That it's not that you should boast, but if you were going to boast.
Yes, yeah.
That let it be, that your boasting be and that you know God.
Yes, that's right.
And
So,
that, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, like, even though there, you have to be careful because, like, when you are knowing stuff and then you're correcting people, then they just automatically, sometimes dispensively start thinking you're being pompous. Because I'm just, just that happens.
In people that are in leadership positions, they are even more tempted with this idea of pride because by their nature, by the gifts that they've been given, they might know more than others. For instance, like knowledge is a good example. Because in our society, knowledge is power. In our society, the one who knows the most, he is the one who has the most authority. He is the one who making the most money. He is the one who can get the most done because he knows, right? He knows. The people that get like the highest paying jobs are the ones that know. Okay, so we honor knowledge in our society. We honor it, and the more we have it, the greater power we have. Okay, so who is the humble man then? The humble person is the person who can have this while at the same time acknowledging that any good that he has come from God and not from himself. So when he uses this knowledge, he uses it as a steward. Right? Any gift that I have, God is calling me to use it as a steward, that we are a caretaker of this, that we are a person who is responsible for wisely using this gift, but the gift is not of ourselves. Right? It's like in the parable of the wicked vine dressers. You familiar with this parable? This parable where you have this vineyard owner that has a vineyard, and that he travels to a far country, and he puts these vine dressers responsible for his vineyard. And when the time of harvest comes, the vineyard owner, he sends like a servant of his to these vine dressers, and he says, give me some of the crop, right? And they kill him. They said, no, we're not going to give you anything. And then the next year he sends another one, and they kill him. They doesn't send anything. And he keeps going. And finally he sends his son, and they kill his son, and they don't give him anything. Why? Because those vine dressers believed that the vineyard was their own. They believed that even though what their responsibility was very small, like the vineyard owner, he is the one who planted the vineyard, he is the one who bought the vineyard, he's the one who prepared the vineyard, he's the one who did everything. And he told these vine dressers, just stay there and guard it, stay there and oversee it, but I'm the one who did most of the work. Okay, same with us. Like, God created us, he gave us all of what we are and all that what we have, and he says your responsibility is just to take care of this, but you are not the owners. We are not the owners of ourselves. God is the owner. We are just here to be good stewards of what it is that God has given us, okay, of our bodies, souls, and spirits. So this is humility. Humility is to acknowledge God as the owner, and I'm only a steward. So because I'm a steward, whatever the owner comes and tells me to do, I do. You know, in our society, it's like, you know what, I own my body, don't tell me what to do with my body. Okay, yes, maybe if you believe you are the owner of your body, then no one can tell you what to do with your body. But you are not the owner. God is the owner. So when God tells me what I should do with my mind, what I should do with my body, what I should do with my eyes, what I should do with that, because we are the vineyard, right? We are God's vineyard, and he has planted us, and he wants us to grow and to thrive. And so our responsibility as the steward of this vineyard is to say, yes, I will do what you have told me to do. Okay? That is humility. Okay? Humility is acknowledging God as the owner and I am the steward. Humility is not looking at this vineyard that God has planted and say, this is a horrible vineyard. That's not humility. Okay, so we have this backwards sometimes when we think about humility is self-deprecation, looking at ourselves that we are like not good enough, all that stuff. That is not humility.
You know that verse that said like knowledge will increase in the last days, and then this is the information age, but it's not necessarily good because it's being used for bad stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't lead to holiness, right? It leads to people being more prideful because I believe I have this power now, right? Knowledge is power. I believe I have this power, so I don't even need God because I have it, right? I mean, in our history, the more science advances, the more we discover the amazing things God created. Instead of looking at it in awe and saying, wow, this is amazing what God created, now we're like, oh, well, we know how it is, so we don't need God. Like we understand it all now, so we don't need God to be in the picture because we can explain everything without God. Well, maybe you can explain it, but you couldn't make it. And that's the point. Like making it. Can you make it? Can you make life? No. Even if you understand life, that doesn't mean you can make life. So here, humility, right? Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and then what? He will lift you. He will lift you up. This is the result of humility, right? Because we all want to be lifted, right? We all want to thrive. We want to be healthy. We want to be successful. We want to be successful in our lives in every possible way. God is going to be the one to lift, both physically and spiritually to lift. Okay? He is the one who says, because you are open to me, because you acknowledge me, because you see me as the source of goodness in you, I will pour goodness upon you. I will give you every good thing. What is it that prevents God from giving us more good things? It's not because God is stingy. It's because we will fall into pride if he gives us everything we want. Okay? That's what prevents him from giving us what we want. It's me. The moment I begin to have everything that I want is the moment I begin the process of the fall. Because I will naturally start to forget God. When is it that we remember God the most? It's in the midst of suffering. It's the midst of feeling weakness, in the midst of feeling that I cannot do things on my own. This is why God has to constantly remind us all the time, that you are not sufficient, that you cannot do. He presents us these challenges, like, in the book of St. James, when we're speaking about trials and temptations, right? He presents us with these trials and temptations. And why do we say all the time that these are good for us? Because they are the ones that humble us. They're the ones that remind us of that we are actually dust. They're the ones that remind us of the reality of life that we are in and who we are. Because without them, as just part of our human condition, we naturally want to believe that we are gods. This is what we want. We want to believe that we are gods. We want to believe that we are all powerful. We want to believe that we are in need of no one and no thing, and that I'm sufficient of myself. And it's only when we're always reminded again and again and again that that's not true, do we look to God. Okay.
I remember remember Paul saying that too, that because he was getting so where he was knowing God, even though he wasn't one of the original, God had to humble him because he was getting to where he knew too much about him. He said something like that one time.
He was speaking about the thorn in the flesh, right? So that's an example. That's a good example, right? So Saint Paul, he had this thorn in the flesh, which we believe to be a kind of blindness that he had. So he had this this malady, this illness of blindness. Okay, and you can imagine someone like Saint Paul who was using, like who was an apostle who was doing everything like for God and obeying God and so many things that God would make things easy for him. It's like, oh, okay, you want to go preach to all these countries? Oh, you want to write 14 epistles? Okay, I'm going to make it easy for you. You're going to be perfectly in health. You're never going to be tired. You're going to go everywhere and people are going to listen to you because you are spreading my word and everything's going to be great. But you see the opposite. Why? Because St. Paul, maybe above any other human, okay, would have been the one most likely to fall into pride because he's seeing how much gifts God has given him to work for his kingdom. So the more God gives us, the more there has to be this thorn in the side, that when St. Paul asked God to lift it from him, he said, no, because my strength is perfected in weakness, right? When that's what he said, my strength is perfected in weakness.
But then even it's a paradox because Joseph, he kind of bragged that they were going to be bowing down, but then God, if it wasn't for him doing that, he wouldn't have gotten to where he was governor, but God let him be. He lifted him up even though he upset the people because of kind of, maybe they thought he was conceited because he had got that self, that.
So the dream that Joseph had was a prophecy of the future, but God didn't intend for him to boast about it. That was Joseph chose to boast, which ultimately led to his brothers getting angry at him and then delivering him to as a slave and all of that. But even if Joseph had not boasted, because that was not, God did not tell him, go boast of this. Okay? Even if he had not boasted, somehow God would have made it to happen. Okay.
But then Esau, though, he was being humble because he didn't say, okay, you have it, and then God punished him when he was like, I can do without that. I mean, it's like there's still always like, or David, he got so prideful that then he did that, and God forgave him, though, and it was so horrible what he did.
So what we're speaking about here is not related to forgiveness. God will forgive anyone, even the most prideful. The issue with the prideful is that usually the prideful do not ask for forgiveness. And that was the difference between King David. King David asked for forgiveness. Those who are really prideful, they will not ask for forgiveness. They believe that what they're doing is right. They will not admit weakness. They will not admit error. They will not admit anything because that's part of their pride. This is why the pride is the worst sin. The pride is the worst sin because it's the sin that prevents you from returning. Not because God is not going to forgive pride. It's because you will not ask for forgiveness. You will not seek. Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. Okay? So what is he saying? What is the law? When he says if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. What is the law?
Is it that law, is it the law in general?
So there's a specific law here he's speaking about, saying, but if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law.
Is it like the treat your neighbor as yourself?
Yeah.
Law that's
The law of love, essentially. That's the law he's talking about. So he's saying what? If you are speaking evil of your brother, okay, and judging your brother, then you are not a doer of the law. But those who judge are who? What is usually someone who judges when they feel uh, that judging is okay, like when they feel that they are justified in judging another. Why do they judge?
They think they're better?
They think they're better, okay? And they're judging someone who's doing what? A sin, meaning they're breaking the law, right? Like I see someone breaking the law, and so I judge them, and I judge them for breaking the law. But here what St. James is saying is you who judge are breaking the law. So how is it that you are judging someone for breaking the law, and in so doing that, you yourself are breaking the law? Okay, and maybe your breaking of the law is actually worse than their breaking of the law, right? So saying when we judge our brother, we might think that we're being zealous for God. That's what we might think. Someone might think that we are being zealous for God because we are judging a person who is a sinner, okay? Without realizing that we have made ourselves also to be sinners because we judge, right? God is the one who is the judge. Like, God does not want us to judge people, okay? So tell me, what is the difference between judging a person and judging an action, okay? Like when people always say, they quote and say, do not judge. What does that mean? Can we really live a life without judging? What does it mean to judge? What does it mean to judge?
Differentiate between right and wrong.
Okay, so that's one type of judging, right? Differentiating between right and wrong. So when the Bible speaks about do not judge, is it saying we shouldn't differentiate between right and wrong?
No, that's discernment.
Right, okay. So that type of judging is good. Imagine what life would be like if we didn't judge in that way. We didn't discern what was right from wrong. Okay? Like, I choose to, you know, when I go out into the road, I decide to turn into traffic instead of with traffic. Okay? I didn't judge. There was no judgment at all there. Okay? I chose not to judge. One option is good and one option is bad. Okay, what about when it comes to people? How is it that we can discern right from wrong when it comes to people and actions of people?
Paul said bad company corrupts good morals, so we have to judge to choose our companions.
Okay, so maybe there's a person that is committing some kind of a sin, and I judge that this is a sin, and that this is something that I don't want to be exposed to, and so I discern and I judge not to spend time with this person. Bad company corrupts good morals, so I don't want to make company with this person. Now, is that a good kind of judgment or a bad kind of judgment? It's a good. Does everyone agree that it's good?
That's not really judgment. It's more like decision making. I'm making the decision to do certain thing, not really judge. Judge here maybe mean criticize, look bad at something.
So okay,
Yeah.
so would it be
Put somebody down?
so let's say there is someone who is doing drugs, and I go up to them and I say it is wrong for you to do drugs. Is that a good judgment or a bad judgment? Is that a right judgment or a wrong judgment?
Maybe it's not up to me.
Right. It's fine.
I think it comes down to also the intention of the judging. If obviously you judge them with the intent of putting yourself higher or making them feel less, is very different from intending them to better themselves or give up that vice of drugging or something like that.
Right. So that same action, right? The action of going to someone and telling them this action, this thing that you're doing is wrong. That can be a good type of judgment in the sense that I'm judging the action. I'm saying the action is wrong. And on what basis do we judge? Like, what do we use to judge? We judge the action according to what? The standard, right? So that's another thing with judging, is I judge according to God's standard. I'm not judging according to my own standard. I'm not judging because I feel that a certain thing is good and a certain thing is bad. I judge according to God's standard, right? When God tells us that we are to rebuke one another, right? What is rebuking? Rebuking is essentially saying, I am judging your action. Your action is wrong. So I'm going to communicate that to you. Now, why do I communicate that? It's not because I want to feel better about myself. It's not because I want to, make myself to be better than you. It's because I love you. It's because through this action that you're taking, you are liable to lose your salvation, let's say, or you're liable to harm yourself. So because I care about you, I don't want you to be harmed. And so I'm coming to tell you, stop doing this. Stop taking drugs. Don't, cross the street without looking both ways. Like whatever it is, I'm coming to rebuke you, to tell you something that you might not want to hear. And the way I was able to do that was because I had to judge your action. If we abandon the idea of judging altogether, then we're essentially just like walking around without making any choices. And it's impossible not to make a choice. You have to make a choice, whether you want to or not. Your life is full of choices. What do parents do? Parents are constantly judging every moment of every day their children's actions, because they are called by God to raise these children. right? And actually, judging is a part of their job description. If parents do not judge, then who is going to raise these children? Someone has to correct them when they're going wrong. So if a child is doing something wrong, the parent has to come in and stop it and even punish the child for maybe what they were doing wrong. But what is the source of punishment? What is the purpose of punishment? It's not for the parent to say, ha ha, I'm better than you. No, it's because I don't want you to harm yourself. I want you to learn right from wrong. So it's very important when we listen to this word judge, that we understand what type of judgment is being spoken of. Okay? Yes.
I got an idea for it because it says like if you have a problem with a brother, you should go talk to them first, and then if they don't listen to you, then you ask somebody else to make a room of two witnesses. And then here, maybe the problem is they're going and talking about this person without having gone to talk to him first. They already decided that they're guilty without asking him, and then so they're judging. They're not trusting the law, so they're judging that law is wrong. That you're supposed to go talk to that person first.
But who is it speaking? What is it speaking about here? It says, "Do not speak evil of one another." That's the context of the judgment that this is speaking about. Do not speak evil. So if we've established that there's a good kind of judgment, which is a judgment that we judge according to God's standard, that's the purpose of the judgment, is to discern an action as being right or wrong and to help another person, right, from harming themselves. Okay, that's the kind of good judgment we just spoke about. So how does that fit into this? Or this says, do not speak evil of one another. So if I really care about a person, am I going to go and start speaking evil about them, like in this gossipy kind of way, right? No. That is the bad kind of judgment. The bad kind of judgment judges a person, right? In the sense that I have labeled you as a lawbreaker, and that you essentially are without redemption, and that you are like this evil person, that I am better than you, and I don't associate with you, and I can't, like you are essentially going to hell in my eyes. Okay, and you have no redemption at all, and I'm just speaking bad about you, not trying to edify you, not trying to help you. If I'm going to say anything negative, it's not aiming at trying to help you from not harming yourself. It's just intended as gossip and talk, right?
And it may not even be what you thought it was.
Perhaps.
So really, it's my motive behind the judging. Yeah, it's my motive to improve the person, to help him do better.
Yes.
And it's good, yeah.
Yeah, and
My motive to put him down, to say, well, I'm better than you, look at yourself, look what you're doing, then we're insulting him.
yes,
Then this is a bad judgment.
exactly.
But, yeah.
And there are certain actions that cannot have except a bad motive. Like, for instance, gossip. Gossip always has a bad motive. Because if I'm talking, let's say I'm talking about Sharif to you, right? If I'm trying to help Sharif, then I'm not going to be talking to you bad about him, right? If I'm going to be speaking to you about him, maybe it would be because I believe that you have something that could help him. So I come and talk to you, say, hey, do you think that you can go talk to him about this and this and this, and maybe he needs to hear this as like example of yours or encouraging word or whatever, and so he would benefit from that. That would not be gossip, right? Even though I'm talking to you about another person, that's not gossip, right? Gossip doesn't just automatically mean anything you say about another person is gossip, even if it's negative, right? For instance, two parents talk to each other about something that their kids have done. That's maybe a negative thing. Why do they talk to each other? Do they talk because they're making fun of their kids? No, they're concerned about their kids and they want to find what is the best action we can take to help them. So we have to understand the whole idea of judgment and gossip. You can't like necessarily know it from the outside. What is the intention? Why is it that I'm talking about this person? Is it to lift them up or is it to tear them down? So here again, when he's speaking about humility, right? Part of humility is acknowledging the reality of who we are. So the reality of who we are is that we are sinners. So if I am a sinner and I acknowledge myself as a sinner, then how could I go to another person and gossip about them? How could I go and I speak evil of you or I judge you as being, a person that's beyond redemption, a person that is never going to amount to anything, a person who I label like even though you might have other lots of positive things about your character and your personality, but I only pick out this thing that's wrong that you're doing and I characterize your whole person according to this. We do this all the time. Like even in the way we label people, like let's say we call like we call her the adulteress. Okay, we characterize her as an adulteress. Okay, even though she repented since then, we still think of her as the adulteress or the right-hand thief. Okay, he is the thief, right? But he's also the thief that was crucified on the cross with Christ and went to paradise before any of us, right? But we focus on what is the main kind of character that we remember this person by. And a lot of times when it's something negative, we don't ever remove from our mind this negative stigma that we had about this thing. And this is part of judging, right? Somebody comes into the church in a certain way and they've committed all kinds of these sins. But maybe over time they improve, they get better, they change, and yet in our mind we still think of them as this thing that our first impression that we had of them, because we don't want to believe that people can authentically change, right? Even the apostles were afraid of St. Paul, right? The apostles didn't want to accept him because they thought that he was, because he was a murderer, right? He would murder the Christians, right? So they still saw him this way. I'm not saying that it's not good to have caution. Of course it is. And obviously the apostles didn't stick with this opinion of Paul to the end. But sometimes we do, right? Like maybe we have a certain impression of a person, and even after they change, we still hold against them whatever sin we know that they had committed in the past, and we're not willing to let it go. This is judgment. Okay.
And I was thinking too, the gifts, they're not about judging their teaching or healing or different things. And then, but in the Old Testament, you had the position you were priest, judge, king, and now maybe it's comparing that's in the old, and now don't seek to be a judge because a judge is going to more give you judgment, punishment instead of teaching.
Well, there is a good judgment, like we said. So in the church, we are called to judge. Actually, the clergy of the church are the judges of the church. Somebody comes and they fall into some kind of sin, and the priest can say, you cannot take communion for a month. Why can he say that? Because he's making a judgment. Why is he doing it? Is he doing it because he hates this person? No, he's trying to help this person to take seriously the sin that they committed so they don't commit it again. There are people that have been excommunicated from the church. St. Paul excommunicated somebody from the church in 1 Corinthians. Why did he do that? Because he hates this person? Because he feels he's better than this person? No, because he wanted that person to take seriously the sin that he committed, which was having a sexual relationship with his mother-in-law, and then come back again. And certainly that's what happened. After he was excommunicated, in 2 Corinthians, you read that he came back to the church and he repented. So again, what was the purpose? The purpose was something good. Even if it looks harsh, even if you're denying somebody freedom, even if you're taking something away, even though that person is not enjoying that and it looks bad. This is why the world, when they look at someone, if they would hear about someone being rejected or someone being chastised in some way, they look and say, don't judge. You don't understand. What is judgment, right? Judgment, the good kind of judgment can feel bad. The good kind of judgment can feel difficult. But there is a greater, deeper reason to offer this judgment. It is my responsibility. When parents give consequences to their kids, it is not something the kids enjoy, right? But the parents give it for a greater reason, okay? The same is true with the church. The same is true with anyone in authority of anyone else, okay?
So, as you said, the Bible characterizes Rahab as the adulteress and the right-hand thief as the thief. Shouldn't we call them that, or?
No, I'm using that as an example. We call him the thief because that's how we recognize him as a thief, and even after we don't hear anything else about him because he died on the cross. I'm not saying that's wrong to do. I'm just saying sometimes we pick out a sin or something that we see in a person, and we always in our mind characterize them as, oh, this is the person that did that. But for instance, going back to the example of St. Paul, his name was Saul, and he was a Pharisee, and then later he even changed his name, and we called him, now he's an apostle. So we don't, when we think about St. Paul, we don't think, oh yeah, but he was a persecutor of Christians. No, we think of him as an apostle who wrote most of the New Testament, right? So we should have that same mindset with people that we meet on a regular basis. Just because someone has committed a sin, let's say you heard someone lie, okay? Just because you heard someone lie once or twice or whatever, doesn't mean that they are a liar, right? Doesn't mean that we think, if then we think about this, oh, this person's a liar. No, maybe they have a weakness of lying. That doesn't mean that's their only characteristic, right? So to judge would be to think of myself better than them. You know what? I don't lie. This person's a liar. I don't want to associate with that person. Well, maybe I don't lie, but maybe I have another sin that I commit. It's also the case that there are some sins that are more visible than others. right? So let's say I struggle with the sins of my thought, okay? Whereas another person struggles with some kind of sin that's visible, okay? That person that struggles with a visible sin, many people might look to them and say, oh, this person doesn't do what they're supposed to do. And everybody looks at those people and says, oh, they're righteous people. Well, maybe they look righteous because their sins are up here. But God is the one who judges. God is the one who knows, right? So you can't say, oh, this person's, worse than this person or any of that. Our goal is just to edify people, not to make the final judgment call on who these people are or anything. We're just here to edify people. Sometimes, somebody might walk into the church and we make a judgment about them in our head saying, this person could never be Orthodox. We shouldn't even try with them. Like there's no way that they could even go through this process. They could never learn, they could never understand, and because I made this judgment about them, I don't make any effort. And because I don't make any effort, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and they never will. Right? But instead my thought should be what? God brought this person, regardless of their past, regardless of whatever, and we will offer them everything good. It's up to them if they want to change their ways, if they want to accept it, they don't want to accept it, that's up to them. And in the end, I'm not here to judge the character of that person. I'm not here to judge the person. I can judge that this action is right or this action is wrong, but I still offer them love irrespective of what they've done. Yeah.
I know you said it depends on your motive for either edifying the person or bringing them down. But what if it's just if you're pointing out the wrongdoing of somebody to prevent somebody else from doing the same?
That's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have a noble purpose. Your purpose is not to demonstrate your superiority to another person. And in doing that, you are not condemning the first person as much as you are just trying to point out that there's an action that they're doing that's wrong. Now, that should still be done in wisdom, maybe not doing that in the presence of that first person, that you're calling them out in front of everybody and saying, oh, don't be like this person, you wouldn't do like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, but you have to be careful with it. Okay, you have to. It's everything it's not a black and white issue. You have to. Each case is a little different and discern. As long as your motive is good, then in the end, most of the time, our actions will be good. Okay, but sometimes our motives are really not good. Our motives are just kind of backbiting and gossiping and.
So I know that you said that you shouldn't have that mentality of not associating with people. But how sometimes it's necessary to avoid bad company.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that help them? How are you edifying them if you just avoid their company?
It depends on obviously what they're doing. There are some diseases that if you get close to that person with disease, you will catch the disease. And so you can't get close to that person. Like in the Old Testament, like when people had leprosy, okay? You couldn't go touch a leprous person, even if you were trying to help them, because you would get leprosy yourself. If someone is drowning in a pool, you can't just jump in the water and go try to save them because you're going to drown with them. So there's certain precautions that you have to take whenever you're trying to help a person who is ill so that you don't become ill, right? Like even in hospitals, people wear the masks, you don't just kind of go up and treat everybody the same, right? So I'm not trying to say that the person who is ill, that we just abandon them or neglect them. But maybe there are certain ways or certain times or certain places or certain people that have to be the ones to do it. Like if I have a drinking problem and my friend has a drinking problem and I'm trying to stop drinking, but my friend always wants to go to the bars and drink and all of that, and I really want to stop drinking. It's not the best thing for me to go hang out with that person. Does that mean that I'm judging them? No. It just means that I'm trying to stop something that you are not trying to stop. We're not on the same page about it. I can't be with you. Not because you are an evil person and I'm better than you, but simply because I can't be in your presence because you have made a decision to keep doing this and I have made a decision to stop. So in that case, this person who is trying to stop drinking is not the right one to reach out to this other friend to help them. Maybe somebody else is, somebody who is not tempted by drinking, or under some kind of rules or conditions. But so again, it's going to be very specific to this type of situation. Does that answer your question? Okay.
The part about the thief, the Protestants wouldn't, they shouldn't say that because it doesn't say it in the Bible like that.
The what?
That's just from tradition to call them thieves because it doesn't say in the Bible that they're thieves. It doesn't say what they did.
What is it called in the Bible?
It just says the guy on the right and the guy on the left.
I think,
Fine,
that
I
doesn't-
think it says that he was crucified between two thieves, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember now.
If you put it in, you have to put thief because it won't come up any other way. But because everybody just says thief on the cross, even the Protestants.
Okay. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? So he's going on here saying, okay, what is the basis on which, okay, you are judging? Because there is already a judge. You know, like imagine you're going to go into a courtroom and, you know, the judge that's present in the courtroom is the one who is going to make the judgment. Okay? And then somebody from the audience or whatever that's sitting there watching this trial just stands up and all of a sudden starts proclaiming some judgment against this defendant. Okay, well, it's not your role, it's not your place, and it has no bearing, it has no weight. No one's going to listen to your judgment. Your judgment has no point. It's just pointless. It's just rambling, talking. You know, who are you to be even saying this? You have no authority to judge. Okay, so the same here is that, you know, when we judge one another, okay, saying, well, God is the one who's going to judge. You have no influence on that. You have no influence on God. Right? He is judging according to his own standard, according to things that he sees inside people that you never know, that you will never know. Right? This is why we cannot judge, because we judge from the outside. Okay? But how many of us are actually what we appear to be? None of us are what we appear to be. None of us. If we're really honest, none of us are what we appear to be. Each one of us has weaknesses and sins and troubles and trials and all this stuff that are hidden that nobody knows about. So how is it that we are to judge? We cannot. God is the one who sees. God is the one who can judge. And so we don't judge. All we do is we look inside and say, you know what? Maybe that person has some issues with this, but I also have my own issues. I'm not going to judge them. Okay? I can try to help them. I can try to, you know, do certain actions to help them, but that's not judging. That's helping.
Yeah, it does say robbers. I was told it was from the church, the fathers that said that, but the Bible
Okay.
said it was robbers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Why is he speaking about this now? Like first he said, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. Then he starts talking about do not speak evil of your brothers and do not judge. Okay, now he's talking about this. Okay, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But what does it have to do with the topics we were just talking about?
He's either putting those topics in greater context or putting this now in the context of what he just developed. In that, like you said, like we're equal with the dust, that the only reason we're here is because of God. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We have no power of predicting the future. We have no ability to say what's going to happen tomorrow. Only God can.
Very good. So this is a manifestation of humility. How do we know, or not to say this is like the only way, but one of the ways that we can kind of look at our lives and see do we have humility or not is in the way we conduct ourselves. Do we imagine ourselves to be in control and that life is steady state and that we are absolutely certain that tomorrow is going to be like today, right? So here he's saying what? Those people, okay, who say today or tomorrow, we're going to do some business, we're going to go there and spend a whole year there, we're going to buy and sell, we're going to make a profit, we're going to do all this stuff, and we're making all these long-term plans. Now, does this mean that planning for the future is wrong? Why? Doesn't it sound like it's saying planning for the future is wrong? Okay, yes. And that's the point, right? We obviously, as humans that are living, we have to make plans. We have to have calendars. We have to have schedules. We have to have things that we're planning to do, okay? But what is the point? The point is that we understand that all of this is in the context of God's will, right? All of this is in the context of I'm here for some time, and I don't know how long that time is. While I'm here, I'm occupying myself with certain activities, okay? But at any moment, I know that that can be cut short, okay? And when it is cut short, the place I will go and the things that I will do will be far grander and far greater than what I'm busy myself with now. So not only should we not fall into this idea of my whole life is consumed with this world and consumed with the things that I'm doing here, and I'm completely ignoring what comes afterward, but it should actually bring us joy that the things that we're doing here are not going to last forever. As difficult as it might be sometimes for us when we think about it, to accept the idea that we're not going to be here forever, what we really have to kind of understand and accept is that where we are going after is better than here. These business plans and the things I was planning to do next year, whatever, if that were never to happen, the things that I would be doing would be greater than the things that I was planning for myself. And he goes on and he says, instead of saying that, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So again, he said at the beginning, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord will lift you up, right? What is one of the evidences, the manifestations of this humility is that even as I am in this world and I'm making plans, we are making it with the idea that says, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or do that, right? That's an important concept. Yeah.
I'm thinking because things were happening so fast that they never expected, like what happened on Pentecost. Those people instantly converted, and now that the Holy Spirit's around, the Holy Spirit's like the wind, just one way, one thing, one day, just they're being led by like the wind, like however the wind blows.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, certainly at that point in their life, in the early church, there was no structure and everyone was kind of going all over the place. So there wasn't that constant sense of security like we have now. This is one of the reasons actually that faith is diminishing in the West. Faith is diminishing in the West partly because we have too much security. Now, that's not to say that security is a bad thing. I mean, we all like to feel secure, right? But we have so much security that we don't even think that tomorrow there's going to be a war
Yeah.
in Houston, right? Tomorrow there's going to be a famine in Houston. Tomorrow there's not going to be any food to eat. You know, we're not thinking in those terms. So we're always feeling like everything is being provided for us all the time, and so we have no sense of concern for those things. Okay? Again, that's good. It's good that we don't have concern. We're not saying it's that we should have a famine. We're not saying that there should be a war. But we're saying is just the natural, course that of society here, of life here, because of all the peace and security we have, which we thank God for. It's easy when we're in those places to forget that God is the one who's providing this. God is the one who's provided a place for us to live in peace and safety and plenty and abundance so that we don't have to live like people that are in Afghanistan, right? We don't have to live like people that are living in other places where by the very nature of their life there, they have no such security and they have to be turning to some other, source of trust, like some other power, right? And this is true for religion in general, not just for Christianity. The idea that we are looking to a God. The idea that we are looking to someone higher than us to provide for us what we cannot provide for ourselves. But here, because we feel like we can provide everything. I mean, in this country, in some countries you only have fruit for, like in Egypt, like you only have certain fruits on certain times of the year because those fruits are only in season certain times of the year. I remember when I would first go to Egypt from here, not quite understanding it because here you have fruit all year, like anything you want you can get. Whereas over there, it's like, oh no, it's not the time for oranges. I'm like, what do you mean it's not the time for oranges? Like we have oranges all the time. What do you mean? It's a different. We take for granted how much stuff we have. Okay, so even this, like even to remember, in the church we pray the litany of the seasons. Where we pray to like for God to bless the water, to bless the agriculture, to bless the trees and the seeds and the herbs and the air. Like when those prayers were written many, many, many hundreds of years ago, it's because the people look to God as being their sustenance. God, if you don't bless the seeds, if you don't bless the water, if you don't bless this, then we're not going to eat, right? Whereas now, like when we pray, it's like, yeah, bless this and that, and bless HEB and Kroger, and so we have to we have to get back into the mindset of we have all these good things because God is giving us these good things. And if God chose not to give them, we wouldn't have them. What would that look like in reality? I don't know what that would look like. But we, by the grace of God, have been put in a place where we have so much, and God has given us so much, and we should be thankful to God for all these things that He has given. And so that again produces humility in me. Not that I feel, you know what, I'm a master of agriculture and I can plant anything at any time, and our country is so abundant, and we have people planting in the north and the south and the east and the west and the farming, and no, that should not be what comes to my mind is the boastings of man. No, it is the will of God. It's because God has allowed us to achieve this that we should be thankful to Him.
It's actually the opposite too, because once He came, it was that makes maybe once it was that He resurrected, is that marks the end time, and the end time is supposed to be like when all the bad stuff happens. It's talked about, and we're like in the end times already.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like it yet here, like so. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Okay? Here he's kind of like, this is the last verse of this chapter. He's going back to this concept of what? Whenever we're speaking about right and wrong, or humility and pride, or whatever concepts, in the end it's about our actions. Okay? And here he's saying what? It is sin not to do what is good. Like sometimes we think about sin the opposite. We think about sin as doing what is bad. And we can understand that. To sin is to do what is bad. Okay? But what about when we think about it in this way? To not do what is good. To not do what is good. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. God's concept of sin is so different than the world's concept of legality. Because sometimes we conflate these two things. We think, oh, well, it's legal. So if it's legal, it must be okay. Right? The society focuses on the outward action. Right? God focuses on the inward purity. Very different concept. The book by C.S. Lewis, there's a very good book. I recommend everyone to read it. It's called Mere Christianity, okay, by C.S. Lewis. And in this book, he makes this analogy to try to understand the difference between the world's view of morality and God's view of holiness and righteousness, because they are not the same. And he makes this analogy of like a fleet of ships that are all traveling together in the ocean, okay? And he says the secular laws, the worldly rules of morality, essentially says what? Each ship has to stay in its own place and not crash into any other ships. Right? And when you think about what is the legal system is all about rules that govern how one person's actions affect another person. That's all. There's no laws that say you have to love your neighbor. There's no laws that says do not think these certain thoughts. There's no laws that govern the thoughts. There's no laws that govern the inside. The laws only govern the outside. Okay? And then C.S. Lewis goes on to say what? The Christian morality, the Christian righteousness and holiness is not speaking primarily about how the ships would crash into one another or not, but how the status of each ship is. So he goes on to say what? If each ship is in perfect running order, then they will not crash, right? So the focus is not about the crashing. The focus is on the individual, right? If you clean the inside of the cup, then the outside will be clean, right? This is what Christ says. Can you imagine trying to clean the inside of a cup and not the outside? You clean the inside, and then the rest of it will be clean. But if we focus only on cleaning the outside, first of all, we will fail because we will never be successful at trying to do that. Okay? And we're not achieving what God wants because He wants unity with us. In the end, Christianity is not about morality. Christianity is not about ethics. Christianity is far deeper and greater than that. Christianity is about unity with Christ. So to be united with Christ, Christ is not being united with us externally. He's being united with us internally, right? Christ is not saying, come, I want a hug. No, He says, I want to be united with you. I want to be one with you. So to be one with us, it doesn't matter how outside is clean or not. What matters is the inside is clean, okay? So this goes toward that. What is the standard that Christ has set? Not the standard of the world. The standard that Christ has set is that what? If you know to do good and you not do it, this is sin. So we have to ask ourselves, like, of all the things that we know are good, and yet we refrain. We hold back. We stop short of doing them. It's a question for us to ask ourselves.
Sometimes I feel like let's say if there's a truth, and you wanna expound on it, or you wanna say it in front of someone who holds power, isn't that like a good to speak the truth always?
Yeah,
Even
this
if
is a loaded question, huh?
no, I mean, let's say I am thinking of politics. Sometimes people don't like to be in politics. Like even in Egypt, they don't like to talk about it. But whenever, let's say I speak the truth, like no, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to even hear even about politics here or something or about anything, healthcare, anything in anything.
Well, of course, the truth is very important. When it comes to politics, I mean, there are definitely in politics uh, things that are governed by, that should be governed by right and wrong in terms of like, what does God say about it? Something like abortion, for instance.
Exactly.
Abortion is cut and clear. Okay, it's murder, and it should not be tolerated, regardless of whether you believe, any particular political party or whatever. That's just clear. A lot of other things, though, related to politics, like do you want big government? Do you want small government? Do you want high taxes? Do you want low taxes? You want this person? You want that person? Those are all opinions, right? So that is not truth. That's more opinion. And that's definitely not something that should be discussed in the church. Now, it can be discussed among individuals. I mean, it's just your own opinion about, just like your opinion about your favorite color or whatever, right? But when it comes to like the important issues that do affect like the country as a whole, I agree with you. I feel like it is our responsibility as Christians to be a voice of truth um, when it comes to very important issues like that, because those are very clearly based in Scripture. Like those are very clearly when it comes to homosexuality, for instance, again, very clearly expressed as this is the will of God. This is not up to human beings to have an opinion about it one way or the other, right? As Christians, if we believe in the Bible and we believe what God said, this is cut and dry what it is. Now, yes, there are Christians that try to interpret it in a different way and this and that, but that's, first of all, that's not in our tradition in the church, from the early church. It was understood very clearly, and the plain reading of the text is very clear. So definitely for those things, it's important to be involved. I was actually one of the Eastern Orthodox priests that I like to listen to his sermons a lot. He's in California. He's a famous Eastern Orthodox priest. His name is Father Josiah Trenum. And so I was searching for his sermons on YouTube, and I stumbled on this video of him speaking at like this political rally, and he was dressed as a priest, black cassock, and he's giving the speech, and he was like, a lot of people wouldn't expect like someone like me to be here giving a speech like this, because when you look at a priest, you associate him as just being a person who's speaking on behalf of the church. But he says what? I'm not speaking on behalf of the church right now. I'm speaking as an individual that lives in this country, and I have my own political views. And of course, those views are very much, like governed by and directed by his religious beliefs. Yes, but he's doing his civic duty as being a voice of what he believes. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that, and that is something we should be involving in. Like right now, for instance, there's early voting for the midterm elections. Everybody should go vote, right? That's our civic responsibility. We can't always be sitting here bad mouthing the world and bad mouthing the government and bad mouthing everything and saying, oh, these people don't understand, and then we do nothing about it. Like our responsibility is to understand, maybe none of the options are best, okay, but at least which is the least evil, which is the least bad, okay, and say, this is the one I'm going to go and vote for this person, right? Because if I don't vote when I have the ability to, then essentially I have no right to complain.
Also, how he says the people, if you do something without faith, then that makes it a sin also. Because if you're not sure if it's right or wrong,
Yes.
if you don't have faith that it's right, then you should avoid doing it.
Yes.
And now it's like even with like the abortion, the people that'll be like, they can't be sure that when if they want to say it's not a human, they can't be for sure when life starts. So that makes it wrong right there.
Yeah, that's true.
But the thing on the voting too, like if you they sometimes manipulate you, like how someone can make a claim on something like when you ask the question in the wrong way, and it's like then you're saying something you're not meaning to say, right? Like they say that example of when did you stop beating your wife? That's something like that.
Yeah, well, politics is its own beast, I guess. Glory be to God forever, amen. Let's pray.